In a small mountain village in Mexico, everyone considered a certain widow to be the ugliest woman in town. The pretty young women mocked her, humiliated her in the town square, and no one believed anyone could ever see her differently. She always walked with her head down, working from dawn until dusk, raising her 2 children alone in a rundown adobe house that was barely standing. No one spoke kindly to her, no one respected her, and certainly no one would have chosen her. But one man had been watching her quietly for years, a wealthy rancher who passed through the village and saw in her what everyone else refused to see. One day, in front of the entire town, he did something that left the self-proclaimed beautiful women speechless. He stopped in front of the widow and spoke words that changed everything. What followed was a silent war, anonymous threatening letters, cruel lies, and attacks in the dark. Someone was determined to destroy her before she could find happiness. The story begins in San Felipe del Progreso. On a windy morning, Estela Domínguez left Don Macario's store carrying a sack of beans and 2 kilos of corn. She wore her usual faded brown dress, her hair tied in a messy braid, and walked with her as Lord, as if she had learned to take up as little space as possible. At 38, hard work and the sun had etched early wrinkles around her eyes and mouth, her brown skin was weathered, and her rough hands told the story of a woman who had never known rest. Since her husband's death 5 years earlier in an accident on the road to Toluca, Estela had raised Tomás, 14, and Luz, 11, on her own. They lived in a modest adobe house with a rusted tin roof and a small pen holding 3 scrawny chickens. The town knew her story, not with pity, but with mockery. "There goes the ugly one," people whispered as she passed the market. Margarita Esquivel and Jimena Castillo, the 2 women everyone agreed were the most beautiful in town, were sitting on a bench in the square when Estela walked by. Dressed in tight clothes and perfect makeup, they let out a loud laugh at the sight of her. "Look at her, daring to go out like that," Margarita said loudly. "If I had a face like hers, I'd stay locked indoors." "Oh, comadre, don't be mean," Jimena replied with fake sweetness, "though it's true, no amount of money in the world would make anyone look twice at her." Estela clutched the sack to her chest and kept walking without a word. She had learned that silence hurt less. As she turned onto the dirt path leading home, she heard the slow trot of a horse behind her. She stepped aside to let it pass, but the rider stopped beside her. Looking up, she recognized Rodrigo Maldonado, owner of the Las Águilas Ranch, one of the richest and most respected men in the region. Tall, about 45, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and spotless work clothes, he regarded her calmly. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he greeted. "Good afternoon, sir," she replied, lowering her gaze again. "Heading home?" "Yes, sir." "Allow me to walk with you. The road is lonely." Estela felt a lump in her throat. No one ever walked with her. She thought it might be a cruel joke, but in Rodrigo's eyes there was no mockery or pity, only something different, something no one had shown her in years. "Still," she politely declined. He insisted, dismounted, and walked beside her, leading his horse by the reins. When they reached her little house, Estela hurried inside after a barely audible thank you. Rodrigo lingered a moment, looking at the humble home before riding away. What no one knew was that Rodrigo had been observing her for 3 years, how she helped the elderly, shared her meager food, and endured insults with dignity. And in those 3 years, he had made a decision. The next day, Rodrigo returned to town with 2 trusted workers. He stopped in front of the store where the women gathered to gossip. Margarita and Jimena were there, as always. The rancher dismounted and asked loudly, "Good morning. I'm looking for Mrs. Estela Domínguez. Does anyone know where I can find her?" Silence fell. Margarita and Jimena exchanged stunned glances. "She's probably at home," a neighbor answered. "Why are you looking for her, Don Rodrigo?" "That's between her and me," he said firmly, then mounted again and headed toward Estela's house. He found her sweeping the yard. "Mrs. Estela," he said clearly, "I need to speak with you. I've come to ask permission to visit you, to court you, because I've admired you for a long time and I think it's time you knew." Estela was speechless. No one admired her. No one sought her out, least of all a man like him. From the corners, several women watched the scene with wide eyes and open mouths. The news spread like wildfire. By noon, all of San Felipe was talking about it. The richest rancher wanted the widow everyone despised. Margarita and Jimena burned with rage. What could he possibly see in her? Margarita kept repeating. "She's ugly, poor, uneducated, it must be a bad," Jimena said. Ella get bored soon. But deep down, they knew Rodrigo's look was sincere. In her adobe house, Estela sat trembling in the kitchen. Her children watched her, afraid to ask. When Tomás finally did, she could only whisper that she didn't understand it yet. 2 days later, Rodrigo returned with a basket full of fresh fruit, bread, and a roasted chicken. "I thought the children would enjoy this," he said simply. Estela tried to refuse, but he insisted, "It's not charity. It's a gift between friends. And please, call me Rodrigo." He entered the house, met Tomás and Luz, talked to them, and promised to take them to the ranch one day. The children relaxed. Estela felt something inside her begin to thaw. As he left that night under a starry sky, Rodrigo told her, "I know you don't believe me, that you think this is a mistake or a joke. But it isn't. For 3 years Eve watched you help others without expecting anything, bear insults with dignity, raise your children with love even when you have almost nothing. That is true beauty. That is what I want by my side." "I'm not pretty," she murmured. Rodrigo gently lifted her chin. "That's what they made you believe. But I see something different, and soon everyone else will too." His visits became regular. Every few days he brought something useful, seeds, wood to fix the roof, gifts for the children. But more than the gifts, he brought conversation, laughter, and hope. In town, envy turned poisonous. Margarita and Jimena began spreading rumors, that Estela was a witch, that she had bewitched Rodrigo. One Friday afternoon, with the market crowded, Rodrigo stood in the center of the square and announced loudly, "In 1 month I will marry Mrs. Estela Domínguez. I want everyone to know I make this decision with a full heart and a clear mind. She will be my wife and the lady of Las Águilas Ranch. From today on, I expect her to receive the respect she has always deserved." Silence was total. Then Don Macario began clapping, followed by old Doña Petra and the humble field workers. Margarita and Jimena stood pale, without clapping. Rodrigo went to Estela and said, "It's done. In 1 month you'll be my wife, if you accept." With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Yes." But happiness was short-lived. The next morning, Estela found an anonymous letter slipped under her door, full of threats and lies. She hid it, afraid. Rodrigo arrived with a beautiful light blue dress for her to wear when they went to town to choose wedding items. Despite the letter burning in her memory, Estela put it on. Wearing new clothes, something in her posture changed. In the square, all eyes were on them. Rodrigo introduced her proudly. At the fabric shop, Doña Socorro welcomed her warmly and began designing the wedding dress. That night, on the road back to the ranch, a masked rider intercepted Rodrigo with veiled threats. The next day, Estela found a rag doll with a needle in its chest, made from scraps of the blue dress. Fear grew. Then Margarita and Jimena visited the ranch with a terrible lie, that Estela had poisoned her husband and violently driven away his brothers. Though Rodrigo threw them out in fury, a tiny seed of doubt took root. That afternoon, when he asked Estela about her husband, she went pale. "Are you asking if I killed him?" "I didn't believe them, but there is doubt," he admitted. "Hate," Estela asked him to leave. Rodrigo rode away devastated. That same night, he found a piece of the blue dress nailed to his stable door with a knife and a written threat, "If you marry the widow, everything will burn." Furious, he gathered his men and rode to town. Meanwhile, at Estela's house, someone broke in through the back window. It was Jimena, hooded, holding the deed to the house and a box of matches. She threatened to burn everything if Estela didn't give up Rodrigo. Tomás emerged with a stick to defend his mother. Just then Rodrigo arrived with his men. Jimena tried to lie, but the truth came out. Rodrigo confronted her harshly, "You think being pretty gives you the right to everything. But without kindness or character, that beauty is worthless. That's why no man of worth will ever choose you." Jimena and Margarita were brought before the mayor, fined, and sentenced to community service. Rodrigo knelt before Estela and begged forgiveness for doubting her. They reconciled in tears and embraces. In the following weeks, Rodrigo never left Estela alone. He sent men to guard the house and took her to clinics in Toluca, not to change her, but to give her the care she had never had. Her health improved, her skin healed, and most importantly, Rodrigo taught her to value herself. Estela blossomed, her posture straightened, her gaze grew steady, her smile became genuine and radiant. On their wedding day, she entered the church glowing, hair loose for the first time in years, wearing a simple yet elegant white dress. Whispers ran through the pews, "She's beautiful." Margarita and Jimena, forced to attend, watched their world collapse. After the ceremony, they moved to Las Águilas Ranch amid cheers from the workers. The next morning, a rider arrived at a gallop. While reinforcing the foundation of Estela's old house, workers had unearthed a buried chest containing gold coins, land titles, and a letter from her father. Estela was the heir to 300 hectares her uncles had stolen decades earlier. With Elavier's help, she reclaimed her land. She kept the workers on with fair contracts and decent wages, built homes for them, and opened a small school. Her name became synonymous with justice and generosity. A year later, Estela walked through the town square holding Luz's hand, greeted with respect. Passing Margarita and Jimena, she stopped and wished them peace without bitterness. They, living ordinary lives shadowed by their reputation, could only lower their eyes. That night under the stars at the ranch, Rodrigo took Estela's hand. "You know what I love most about you?" he asked softly. "That you never changed. With all that came, money, land, respect, you remained the same humble, strong woman I fell in love with." Estela smiled. "Because you taught me to see myself as I truly am." And so, the woman once called the ugliest in town lived happily, loved and respected, not because her appearance had changed, but because the world finally recognized the beauty she had always carried within, her character, her kindness, and her dignity. True beauty lies not in what the eyes see at first glance, but in what the heart holds forever. Pride and envy crumble, humility and love endure. Those who sow kindness in silence will one day reap honor and happiness.